President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump won their respective primaries in New Hampshire yesterday. Joe Biden, due to a technicality, was actually a write-in candidate and still easily won. We will talk first about the Republican primary, then the Democratic. So listen, the Republican primary is essentially over, with the very remote exception possibility of if Trump whatever. If Trump is in prison, if Trump is dead, if Trump is deemed ineligible by every state, but it is essentially over. The results yesterday, very, very, very lopsided for Donald Trump, but slightly underperforming the polling. Trump ultimately winning by a little over 11 points, Trump 54, Nikki Haley 43. Remember that even though this is an 11-point gap, the polling had it closer to 19. So if you want to paint a rosy picture for Nikki Haley, it would be that she did better than the polling and thus she has momentum and thus South Carolina. It's basically all BS. Every indication is Trump is leading in every single remaining state, including Nikki Haley's home state of South Carolina. This all but seals this nomination for Donald Trump. The hypothetical of Nikki Haley somehow manages to win New Hampshire and then says, hey, it's 1-1. Trump got Iowa. I got New Hampshire. Now we go to the next one. It's a wide open primary. That hypothetical has not come to fruition. Now, you can make the case that there are divisions within the Republican primary electorate, and there are. And we will look later at some of the specifics of those divisions. But one thing that is very interesting is that the divisions are more likely to hurt the eventual Republican nominee in the general election. And that is also something that we will be discussing. Now, for now, Nikki Haley says she's going to stay in the race. In a little bit, we're going to look at her. It's so funny. It's a concession speech, but it sounded like a victory speech. And at the very end, Nikki Haley goes, oh, and by the way, Trump won. But it sounded like a victory speech, which is strange and sort of interesting. And that's something that we're going to talk about as well. When we look at some of the exit polling, we find a number of interesting things when it comes to the Republican exit polls. When it comes to gender, Trump did better with men. Nikki Haley did better with women. When it comes to race, the numbers are pretty similar. Trump got 54% of the white vote and 59% of the non-white vote. The non-white vote is very small in New Hampshire. I think it's important to say. Trump did increasingly less well with older voters. That's interesting. The youngest voters went more for Trump than for Haley, and the oldest voters went more for Nikki Haley. Here is a very important exit poll data point. Trump got 2/3 of those voters who did not graduate from college, but only 41% of those that did. Or to put it a different way, Trump did overwhelmingly better with non-college graduates. Now, when I see that, that's a warning sign to me for the general election, because as it is, you tend to see more education correlate with voting for the more left-wing candidate on the ballot, which of course would be Joe Biden in November, regardless of whether it's Trump or Nikki Haley. And that's an Achilles heel. And many of those college graduates say, I'm not voting Trump under any circumstance. The less money you made, the more likely you were to vote for Trump, which doesn't really make sense since Trump's entire tax policy is one that is skewed and weighted towards the wealthier. So that's another one of these conundra that we have in terms of ideology. The less conservative you were, the more likely you were to vote for Haley. Always interesting to see the evangelical vote. White evangelical Christians went 70% for Trump, whereas non-white evangelical Christians only went 52% for Trump. And in terms of issues that mattered, if you believed that immigration mattered the most, you overwhelmingly voted for Trump, 78%. If you believe the economy is the most important issue, it was close to a 50-50 split. And among voters for whom abortion or foreign policy were the most important issue, they went close to 2/3 for Nikki Haley over Donald Trump. Okay, let's now briefly look here at the Democratic primary, where Joe Biden cruised to victory as a write-in candidate. Because of a technicality, Joe Biden was a write-in candidate. Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson were on the ballot, and still Joe Biden got 52% of the vote. Dean Phillips got 20. There was 14% unprocessed write-ins remaining as of this morning, and Marianne Williamson got 5%. So it's quite interesting. I mean, listen, we probably should never hear from Dean Phillips again. This was his play. New Hampshire was his play. Joe Biden wasn't even officially on the ballot because of this technicality about which state goes first. And he still doubled the vote that Dean Phillips got. I don't understand the justification for Phillips to stay in. He'll probably come up with something despite losing to a write-in, but it's essentially over. So when we think about Nikki Haley staying in, the only justification for Nikki Haley staying in at this point is the what if Trump can't scenario, meaning what if Trump is dead before November or before the RNC officially selects their candidate? What if Trump is in prison and the Republican Party says, hey, you know what, this doesn't make any sense? Even if Trump were to be convicted and sentenced to prison, it is extremely difficult to imagine the timeline would allow for that before the Republican convention over the summer. But if you want to make the argument that Nikki Haley should stay in, despite the fact that she obviously won't win in terms of voting, it would be the what if Trump can't scenario. Here is Ronna McDaniel, the chairwoman of the RNC, saying it's time for Nikki Haley to get out.
Looking at the math and the path going forward, and I don't see it for Nikki Haley. I think she's run a great campaign, but I do think there is a message that's coming out from the voters, which is very clear. We need to unite around our eventual nominee, which is going to be Donald Trump, and we need to make sure we beat Joe Biden. It is 10 months away till the November election, and we can't wait any longer to put our foot on the gas, to beat the worst president, to beat a president that's kept our borders open, allowed fentanyl to pour through.
Fentanyl, also known to others as fentanyl. Listen, Ronna McDaniel is right that Nikki Haley, the numbers just don't work. She has no path to victory. And she is right that their primary concern should be how do they beat Joe Biden in November? Because I'll be very honest, stepping back from the polling, which you look at the polling, you say it looks good, it looks bad for Joe Biden, whatever. Stepping back from the polling, the economy is very solid, and Trump has significantly less support from his own party this time around than he did in 2020, and he lost in 2020. So what Trump is up against is saying, I have less support than I did 4 years ago from my own party. I lost 4 years ago, and somehow I need to figure out a way to win with a good economy for the incumbent president. That is a very difficult proposition. We'll talk about that more. I know not everybody sees that the way I do, but that is a significant uphill battle for Donald Trump, no matter what the polls say. Let's now talk about Nikki Haley. Sometimes it can be tough to maintain an emotional connection with your significant other. You might work in different places at different times. There might be a kid in the way. It can be hard to find time for date nights, especially because kids demand so much attention, which is why I love our sponsor Paired, which is the app for couples. The app will prompt you with a daily question or a game or a guided conversation, all designed by leading psychologists. And the point is to just have a deeper connection with your partner, boost intimacy, build a deeper knowledge of one another. My girlfriend and I will use the prompts on Paired throughout the day to stay connected. For instance, we answered a prompt about what we remember most from the early days of the relationship. It really helps us learn new things, and there can be funny moments as well. An independent study found that couples using Paired saw a 36% increase in the quality of their relationship, and giving a Paired subscription as a gift is also a really great idea. You can try it free for 7 days and get 25% off a subscription. Go to paired.com/Pacman. The link is in the description.